Chapter 28. The night sky loomed over Ruberios, but there was no light left in this ruined land. What had once been a thriving city, filled with devoted followers of luminous Valentine, was now nothing more than rubble and ash. Not a single building remained standing. The streets, once bustling with life, were littered with broken stone, shattered glass, and scorched remains. Rivers of blood soaked the ground, staining the once pristine land in a sea of crimson. The scent of death hung thick in the air, suffocating and inescapable. At the center of this absolute destruction stood a figure, no longer Rimuru Tempest, but something else entirely. His once gentle golden eyes had turned into an eerie, glowing purple. Twin dragon horns protruded from his head, dark as the abyss, crackling with raw, unrestrained energy. His body radiated overwhelming power, an oppressive force that sent waves of unease to all who laid eyes upon him. His lips curled into a twisted smirk as if reveling in the chaos. Bound a short distance away, Hinata Sakaguchi struggled against her restraints, her body trembling, not from fear, but from rage. Her eyes burned with hatred as she glared at Rimuru, but before she could utter a single word, a blinding flash of light illuminated the battlefield. In an instant, powerful beings arrived at her side. Guy Crimson, the Lord of the Darkness, stood tall, his piercing gaze locked onto Rimuru. His usual arrogance was nowhere to be found, replaced instead by something close to worry. Beside him, Velzard's icy blue eyes narrowed as she took in the scene. Rain and Misery, the ever-loyal maids of the Guy Crimson, stood behind their master, their expressions unreadable. Dino, for once, looked wide awake, his usual laziness completely erased. Ramirez hovered next to him, her wings fluttering anxiously. Veldora, Rimuru's so-called best friend, clenched his fists, his golden eyes filled with both shock and anger. Luminous Valentine, the ruler of Ruberios, had fallen silent, her face pale as she stared at the ruins of her nation. Everything she had built, gone. A slow realization dawned on her, sinking into her very core. Her people, her city, her kingdom, everything had been reduced to nothing. Ruberios, Luminous whispered, her voice barely audible. Tears welled up in her normally cold, unfeeling eyes, but she refused to let them fall. Instead, she turned her gaze to Rimuru, no, the entity controlling him. She gritted her teeth, swallowing the overwhelming sorrow that threatened to consume her. Hinata, still bound, called out desperately. Lady Luminous. Luminous turned toward her, eyes dark with sorrow. Without hesitation, she released Hinata from her restraints. Hinata stumbled forward, falling to her knees. Lady Luminous, I had to come. I couldn't just stand by while you were being tortured. Luminous closed her eyes for a moment before shaking her head. Rimuru didn't torture me, Hinata. Hinata's body froze, her breath catching in her throat. What? Luminous exhaled sharply. My kingdom was destroyed because of what you did, Hinata. Because of your choices. The words struck like a blade to the heart. Hinata's fingers curled into fists, guilt washing over her. She clenched her teeth and lowered her head. I'm sorry. Luminous sighed but placed a hand on her shoulder. At the very least, you are still alive. Guy Crimson, having had enough of the conversation, stepped forward. His crimson eyes gleamed with an unsettling sharpness. Enough chit-chat, he said, voice firm. We need to figure out whether Rimuru is really gone or not. Velzard frowned, an ominous feeling creeping into her gut. Veldora and Ramirez stepped forward hesitantly, their gazes locked onto Rimuru's possessed form. Oi, Rimuru, enough of this, let's head back to Tempest. Veldora shouted. His voice, usually filled with carefree arrogance, held a desperate edge. Ramirez, flapping her wings frantically, added, yeah. You don't have to do this. Snap out of it already. For a moment, there was silence. Then, the possessed Rimuru turned toward them, a slow, eerie smile spreading across his face. What do we have here? Ivaraj's voice came from Rimuru's mouth, smooth and taunting. Ah, Rimuru's friends, I see. She chuckled, a dark, haunting sound that sent chills down their spines. Let me make something very clear, she continued, her glowing purple eyes flickering dangerously. Rimuru Tempest is no more. His mind is shattered, drowning in his own regrets. I have full control over this body now. And there is no one alive who can stop me. Guy's expression darkened. This is bad, really bad. Velzard exhaled sharply, turning toward Veldora. We don't have a choice, we have to kill him. Veldora's eyes widened, his body tensing. No, we are not killing Rimuru. Ramirez spun around, glaring at Velzard. He's still in there, we can bring him back. Dino, who had been silent up until now, sighed. As much as I hate to admit it, they're right. Killing him isn't the answer. Velzard ran a hand through her hair and groaned. Whatever. But don't think this is going to be easy. Guy glanced at his maids. Rain, Misery, prepare for battle. The two primordial demons nodded, stepping forward with eerie grace. Hinata, regaining her strength, summoned her weapon, Reaper. All help. Luminous glanced at her sharply. No, you're leaving. Hinata's eyes narrowed. Why? Luminous turned to her, expression unreadable. Go to Tempest. There's something I want you to retrieve. Hinata hesitated. What is it? In my secret chamber, there is a body. Bring it to Tempest and tell Shuna, the pink-haired girl, to keep it safe. Hinata's expression darkened in confusion. Why are you sending me away? Luminous, cold gaze hardened. Because this is your punishment. You were the reason for Rubrio's destruction. Now go. Hinata clenched her fists. She wanted to argue. She wanted to stay and fight. But in the end, she swallowed her pride and gave a small nod. Quote. As you wish, Lady Luminous. With one final glance at Rimuru, she turned and disappeared into the distance. Ivaraj watched her leave with amusement. So, one of Rimuru's little prey gets to escape. How unfortunate, but in the end, it doesn't matter. She turned her glowing eyes back to the group, lips curling into a twisted grin. Because I have full control now, and there's no one left to stop me. Velzard stepped forward, her icy aura crackling with power. Don't get ahead of yourself, Ivaraj. Ivaraj's grin widened. Enough of this nonsense. Let's battle. After I kill all of you, I can finally fulfill my goal. The air grew heavy as Guy, Velzard, Veldora, Luminous, Dino, Romulus, Rain, and Misery all braced themselves. Guy Crimson's crimson eyes flickered toward Romulus, his sharp mind already formulating a plan. Hey, Romulus, he said, keeping his voice calm but firm. You still have that trick you used on Milam? The one that brought her back to her senses? Romulus flinched at the sudden question, but she quickly nodded. Yeah, I can still do it, but this isn't my true form. I'll need a lot more time than before, and I have to focus completely. If I'm interrupted, I'll fail. Guy turned his gaze toward Rain, his ever-loyal maid. Rain, keep Romulus safe and sound. Let nothing interrupt her. Rain's red eyes gleamed with understanding. As you wish, Guy-sama. She stepped forward, positioning herself in front of Romulus, her aura flaring with killing intent. Whatever came their way, she would cut it down before it could. Get near. Guy turned back to Ivaraj, his expression hardening. Now, let's see how strong you really are. Without another word, Guy, Velzard, Veldora, Luminous, Misery, and Dino launched themselves at Ivaraj, their combined presence warping the air itself. Ivaraj smirked as they charged, her glowing purple eyes gleaming with twisted amusement. How entertaining, she purred before vanishing in a blur of speed. Guy barely had time to react before Ivaraj appeared in front of him, her clawed hand slashing toward his throat. He barely managed to block with his arm, but the sheer force sent him hurtling backward, crashing through the ruins with a thunderous boom. Before she could press her advantage, Velzard was already there, her icy breath engulfing the battlefield. A blizzard of absolute zero raged toward Ivaraj, freezing everything in its path. But Ivaraj only laughed, raising a single hand. A pulse of raw energy erupted from her palm, shattering the ice storm as if it were nothing more than fragile glass. Velzard's eyes narrowed. TCH, troublesome. Veldora roared as he charged, his fists crackling with pure storm energy. I'll smash you into the ground. Lightning surged through his arm as he threw a devastating punch, the force behind it enough to obliterate mountains. But Ivaraj merely tilted her head, dodging the attack with unnatural ease. She grabbed Veldora's arm in a vice-like grip, her fingers digging into his scales. You're slow, she whispered mockingly before twisting his arm and hurling him into the air. Veldora crashed into the ground with enough force to create a massive crater. Dust and debris exploded into the air as he groaned, shaking his head. Damn, she's strong. Before Ivaraj could finish him off, Luminous appeared behind her, wielding a blade made of pure divine light. She slashed downward, her attack so precise that it cut the very air apart. Ivaraj turned at the last second, catching the blade with her bare hand. Sparks erupted as divine energy clashed with dark power. How disappointing, Ivaraj sighed before tightening her grip. Luminous's blade shattered. Her eyes widened in shock, but she had no time to react as Ivaraj lashed out with a kick, sending her flying into a crumbling wall. Misery's shadows surged forward, tendrils of abyssal energy twisting toward Ivaraj. At the same time, Dino summoned swords of pure starlight, launching them with pinpoint precision. Ivaraj simply raised her hand, summoning a barrier of dark energy. The attacks collided with it, but rather than exploding, the energy was absorbed. Dino clicked his tongue. That's not fair. Misery narrowed her eyes. She's absorbing attacks. Before they could strategize, Ivaraj moved again, this time appearing in front of Misery. She reached forward, grabbing the primordial demoness by the throat. Misery gasped as dark energy surged through her body, corrupting her essence. But before Ivaraj could finish her off, boom, a massive explosion of flames and ice erupted from behind. Velzard and Guy struck together, their combined power shattering the ground beneath them. Ivaraj was forced to release Misery, leaping backward as the attacks crashed into the battlefield. A massive shockwave spread outward, leveling the surrounding ruins. She landed gracefully, brushing dust off Rimuru's possessed body. I see, you three are the real threats, she mused, her eyes flickering toward Guy, Velzard, and Veldora. The rest of you are just fodder. Veldora's golden eyes burned with fury. I'll show you fodder. With a deafening roar, he transformed into his full dragon form, his massive body towering over the battlefield. Storm clouds gathered above, lightning crackling with raw destructive power. Velzard followed suit, her body glowing as she assumed her dragon form. An aura of absolute cold radiated from her, freezing the very air around her. Guy smirked. All right then, time to stop holding back. His crimson aura flared, his demonic power reaching its peak. The ground trembled, the sky shattered. A battle between true monsters had begun. Meanwhile, Rain stood protectively in front of Romulus, her hand gripping the hilt of her sword tightly. The small fairy had closed her eyes, floating midair as an enormous amount of spirit energy gathered around her. Sweat dripped down Ramirez's forehead. I need more time, just a little more. Rain didn't respond, she simply stood her ground. Then, movement. From the shadows, something emerged. A grotesque creature, its form twisted and unnatural, a byproduct of Ivaraj's corruption. It lunged toward Romulus. Rain moved instantly. Slash. In a single, precise motion, she beheaded the creature. Its body crumbled into nothingness, erased from existence. But more began to appear. Rain's eyes remained calm, unwavering. You're not getting through. She raised her blade. And then, she danced. Every movement was a blur, a seamless flow of destruction. Heads rolled. Bodies vanished. Not a single creature got past her. Romulus, still gathering power, gritted her teeth. Almost there. The fight raged on. Guy and Velzard attacked in perfect unison, their overwhelming power shaking the very fabric of reality. Ivaraj was strong, but she was finally being pushed back. Velzard's ice encased the battlefield, while Guy's flames burned through it, creating a chaotic storm of destruction. Veldora roared, summoning a storm that turned the sky black. Ivaraj, still smiling, dodged. She was fast, too fast, but even she couldn't completely avoid everything. A deep gash ran down Rimuru's possessed arm, icy flames eating away at the wound. For the first time, Ivaraj frowned. Interesting. Velzard smirked. So, you can be hurt. Ivaraj exhaled. I suppose I should stop playing around. The air shifted. A pulse of pure malice erupted from Ivaraj, the sheer weight of it pressing down on everything. Even Guy felt his muscles tense. Velzard's eyes narrowed. She's been holding back this entire time. Ivaraj chuckled. Did you really think I was fighting seriously? A wave of pure destruction erupted from her. The battle had only just begun. In Rimuru's mind, an endless void, darkness, an infinite abyss stretched beyond comprehension. No stars, no sky, no ground, just a void of eternal nothingness. Silence reigned, oppressive and suffocating, as though even sound had been swallowed by the emptiness. Time had no meaning here. There was no past, no future, only the present, a frozen, endless moment. In this abyss, a lone figure floated. A young man with long black hair, his golden eyes dull, lifeless. Two curved black horns sprouted from his head, marking his true nature. His body, once brimming with strength and vitality, was now limp, drifting weightlessly in the void. This was Rimuru Tempest, and he was utterly, irreparably broken. His lips trembled as he whispered, over and over, the words that had been consuming him. I was useless. His voice cracked, hoarse and empty. I was an idiot. A bitter chuckle escaped him, but it lacked warmth. It was hollow, just like him. I failed to protect Shizu-san, the first person I ever loved. A sharp pain tore through his chest, but there was no wound. Only regret. A regret so deep it had carved itself into his very soul. I failed to protect my people, the ones who trusted me with their lives. His words echoed into the void, unanswered. I failed to protect Shizu-san. I failed to protect my people. He repeated it, again, and again, and again. Each repetition sank deeper into his soul, a jagged blade of regret twisting inside him. How did I get here? His voice barely above a whisper. Who cares? His golden eyes stared into the abyss, seeing nothing. Feeling nothing. I'm all alone again. A bitter, empty laugh. But this is nice, isn't it? I have no one to lose. Nothing to lose. His fingers twitched, then curled into fists. All I have is nothingness. The weight of his despair pressed down on him. He had lost everything, his people, his purpose, even his own body. Ivraj had taken it all. And now, he was left here, a broken fragment of what once was. Was there even a point in trying anymore? Was there even a point to him? Maybe, just maybe, it would be easier to let go. To fade into this void. Deeper within Rimuru's consciousness, someone watched. A presence, unseen, yet ever present. A woman stood in the vast darkness, her luminous blue hair flowing around her like liquid stardust. Her crimson eyes, similar to Rimuru's, were filled with pain, an emotion she had never truly felt before. This was Seal, not just an ultimate skill. Not just an artificial intelligence. She was more now. She was alive, and yet, she was powerless. She clenched her fists, her heart aching as she gazed at her master, the man she cherished more than anything in existence, drifting in despair. Her Rimuru, the one who had given her purpose. The one she loved. But he was slipping away. And she couldn't reach him. No matter how much she tried, she remained bound, trapped by Ivraj's control. But she would not give up. She was Seal, and she would find a way. Her mind, once purely logical, now burning with desperate determination, began to analyze every possible solution. Less than attempting connection with Master, greater than. Less than failed. Ivraj's control is too strong. Greater than. Less than searching for alternative routes, greater than. Less than attempting to communicate through subconscious links, greater than. Less than failed. Master's mental state is unstable. Greater than. Less than analyzing soul resonance patterns, greater than. Less than failed. Ivraj has severed all internal connections. Greater than. Less than attempting direct override of Ivraj's possession, greater than. Less than failed. Ivraj's corruption is absolute. Greater than. Less than attempting memory recall stimulation, greater than. Less than failed. Master's consciousness is too fragmented. Greater than. Less than searching for external interference possibilities, greater than. Less than failed. No external forces detected within Master's consciousness. Greater than. Less than attempting emergency soul synchronization, greater than. Less than failed. Master's soul is in a critical state. Greater than. Less than. Greater than. Less than attempting final method, greater than. Less than. Greater than. Less than failure. Greater than. Ciel's hands trembled. She had tried everything, and nothing worked. Tears she had never known she could shed streamed down her face. She was watching him suffer. And she was helpless. Master, she whispered, please don't leave me. Beyond the confines of Rimuru's mind, in a realm untouched by the living, a woman stood. A soul, pure and untainted, yet burdened with sorrow. Shizu Izawa. She had been watching. Ever since her death, she had never strayed far from Rimuru. Even though she was no longer part of the world, she had never stopped watching over him. And now, she was witnessing the man she cared for fade away. Rimuru, her voice trembled. She reached out, but her hands passed through the void. She was here, but he couldn't see her. He couldn't hear her. He couldn't feel her. Her chest ached with an unbearable pain. She had never realized how much she loved him. Not until now. Not until she saw him breaking apart, piece by piece, before her very eyes. She clenched her fists. No, she wouldn't let this happen. She didn't care if she was just a spirit. She didn't care if she wasn't supposed to interfere. She didn't care if it was impossible. She would find a way to bring Rimuru back. She swore it, even if she had to defy fate itself. Even if she had to tear apart the heavens. Even if she had to shatter the laws of existence. She would bring him back. And she would keep him safe. Because no matter what, she would never leave him alone. Not again. A deafening silence swept through the battlefield as the dust settled from the previous exchange. Though barely moments had passed, the devastation was undeniable. The air crackled with residual energy, and the once solid ground had become a shattered wasteland of molten rock and frozen tundra. Ivaraj stood at the center of it all, unscathed but no longer smiling. The wound on Rimuru's possessed body, where Velzard's ice had burned through, had already begun to close, yet the irritation in her eyes betrayed something new. Not pain, but recognition. So, you can actually make me bleed, Ivaraj murmured, her voice devoid of mockery now. She flexed Rimuru's fingers, testing the residual sting in the flesh. I suppose that warrants a response. The world shifted in an instant. A force unlike anything before rippled outward from Ivaraj, a dense, crushing pressure that made even Guy hesitate for a fraction of a second. The very concept of energy itself trembled in the presence of this overwhelming malice, a power so absolute it felt as though reality itself might break. And then, she moved. With a speed beyond comprehension, she was suddenly in front of Velzard. No sound, no warning, just immediate, terrifying proximity. Velzard's eyes widened, her instincts screaming danger, but before she could react, Ivaraj's palm thrust forward. Boom! The impact sent Velzard hurtling backward, her entire body embedding into the ruined remains of a mountain behind her. Ice and rock shattered upon impact, avalanches cascading down as shockwaves rippled through the battlefield. Before anyone could react, Ivaraj was already upon Veldora. The storm dragon barely had time to cross his arms in defense before Ivaraj's leg crashed into his torso with the force of a meteor. The sheer kinetic energy behind it was enough to send him spiraling through the sky, his massive dragon form crashing into the storm clouds above. Lightning surged, exploding outward as the heavens themselves convulsed from the force. Guy Crimson reacted instantly, crimson light erupting from his fingertips as he unleashed a wave of destructive hellfire. The flames tore through the air, the temperature surpassing that of a collapsing star, space itself distorting under the heat. But Ivaraj didn't dodge. Instead, she raised a single hand and caught the infernal blaze in her palm. The fire twisted, condensed, and then, vanished. Not absorbed, not countered, simply erased, as though it had never existed. Guy's expression darkened. That was not something even Velgrind could do. A little disappointing, Ivaraj mused, her glowing violet eyes turning toward him. I expected more from the strongest demon lord. The insult barely registered before she was upon him. Her attack was unreadable, too fast, too precise, too overwhelming. Guy barely managed to react, raising his arms in a cross guard as her palm struck his forearms. But even with his defenses, the force was catastrophic. The ground beneath him cratered violently, entire sections of the battlefield collapsing into an abyss of molten rock as Guy was driven downward. The demon lord grit his teeth. No, this wasn't something he could afford to take passively. A surge of pure demonic energy erupted from him in response, a force that rivaled the apocalypse itself. Hell flare. The darkness expanded, an all-consuming void of destruction that sought to erase anything within its radius. This time, Ivaraj moved. She blurred out of sight just as the attack expanded, reappearing above Guy with an outstretched hand. Black lightning surged down her arm before a sphere of pulsating. Destruction formed in her palm, a condensed force that vibrated with the energy of collapsed stars. She thrust it downward. Guy had no choice but to evade, teleporting away at the last second as the attack connected with the battlefield below. The moment it struck, boom, a deafening explosion erupted, the shockwave obliterating the surrounding landscape. The very fabric of reality groaned under the impact, creating spatial fractures in the air, distortions that bent time and space unnaturally. The once barren wasteland was no more, now, it was a bottomless void of pure annihilation. In the sky above, Veldora finally recovered from her previous attack, his golden eyes burning with fury. I've had enough of this, he bellowed. The storm clouds above darkened further, swirling into a vortex of pure destruction. Electricity surged around his massive dragon body, his mana coalescing into something unfathomable. Then, with a single motion, he breathed. The attack that followed was nothing short of divine punishment itself. The storm of annihilation erupted from his maw, a torrent of pure chaos that consumed the entire battlefield below. The air screamed as it was torn apart, space itself distorting under the sheer magnitude of his power. Ivaraj, however, didn't even look concerned. Instead of dodging, she raised both hands, and caught the breath attack head-on. The instant it connected, a pulse of otherworldly energy erupted from her palms, negating the entirety of Veldora's breath attack. The moment the storm should have torn through her, it instead ceased to exist. The air grew still. For the first time, a sliver of genuine alarm flashed in Veldora's eyes. Impossible. Velzard reappeared in an instant, her body wreathed in frost that could end creation itself. I won't let you mock us any further, she declared coldly. Raising her hand, she summoned the absolute zero field, an area of frost so intense that even conceptual existence would freeze within it. The temperature dropped instantly, everything within the field turned into motionless ice, time itself seeming to halt in response. And yet, Ivaraj moved. Even within an environment where movement should have been impossible, she raised a single finger and snapped. The entire absolute zero field shattered. A silence heavier than before followed. Guy, Velzard, and Veldora all stood their ground, their expressions unreadable. This wasn't an opponent they could take lightly. No matter how powerful they were, Ivaraj was on an entirely different level. But, she had been pushed back. The wound on Rimuru's arm, though healed, proved that she wasn't invincible. Their combined efforts had left an impact, even if minuscule. You're persistent, Ivaraj admitted, exhaling slightly. Her gaze flickered toward Romulus, who was still in the midst of gathering her power. A knowing smirk tugged at her lips. Ah, so that's what you're planning. Guy's eyes widened slightly, and then, she vanished. No warning, no transition, just gone. Rain, still standing protectively before Romulus, reacted in the same breath. Her blade was already drawn as Ivaraj reappeared behind her. Without hesitation, Rain swung, her aura flaring with deadly precision. But she wasn't fast enough. Ivaraj moved too smoothly, effortlessly twisting past Rain's attack as her hand reached out. A burst of blinding light erupted between them. Luminous had arrived. Her divine radiance expanded in all directions, burning with such intensity that even Ivaraj momentarily withdrew. The sheer holiness of it was something even she seemed unwilling to take head-on. You're not touching her, Luminous stated, stepping forward with unwavering confidence. Ivaraj narrowed her eyes. For the first time, a flicker of irritation crossed her expression. The battlefield trembled beneath the weight of the clashing titans. The air had turned thick with power, reality itself straining to contain the overwhelming forces at play. Ivaraj stood at the center of it all, untouched yet clearly affected. The once amused expression on her face had hardened, and for the first time, something close to frustration flickered in her violet eyes. A burst of divine light erupted between her and Rain. Luminous Valentine had arrived. The radiance of her presence bathed the battlefield in golden brilliance, her gaze locked onto the entity before her. You're not laying a single finger on Romulus, Luminous declared, her voice firm, unwavering. Ivaraj regarded her silently before a slow smirk crept across her lips. Oh, how amusing. Do you actually believe you can stop me? Luminous didn't bother responding. Instead, she raised her hand, and an overwhelming surge of holy energy exploded forth. The sheer magnitude of divine power condensed into a single moment, a radiance that burned through the void itself. Ivaraj barely had time to react before she was engulfed in pure celestial wrath. But she did not scream. Instead, from within the brilliance, a single pulse of power erupted outward, shattering Luminous's attack in an instant. Ivaraj emerged from the light, her form untouched, but her expression was no longer one of amusement. It was colder now, more calculating. You, she said slowly, turning her gaze fully toward Luminous. You're going to be an annoying rat. Before she could strike, another force surged toward her, Velzard, followed closely by Guy. The duo moved in perfect coordination, a whirlwind of ice and destruction converging upon Ivaraj with lethal precision. Velzard's frost trailed behind her movements, freezing space itself, while Guy's hellfire burned through existence, warping reality in his wake. Ivaraj reacted instantly, dodging to the side, but Veldora, now in his human form, was already there, waiting. His fists, crackling with the raw power of storms, collided against Ivaraj's frame with enough force to shatter mountains. The impact sent shockwaves rippling through the battlefield, tearing through the sky itself. For the first time, Ivaraj staggered. The brief moment of vulnerability did not go unnoticed. Dino, who had remained observing until now, finally stepped in. A shadow descended as he raised his massive greatsword overhead, the blade pulsating with magical energy. Now this is getting interesting, he muttered, before swinging down with full force. Ivoraj barely managed to twist her body, the blade narrowly missing her by inches, but the sheer pressure behind Dino's attack carved a massive scar into the land below, splitting the ground apart like a divine judgment. Misery moved swiftly to Rain's side, reinforcing the protective barrier around Rimuru. "We're holding the line here," she said firmly. Rain gave a quick nod, adjusting her stance. Back on the battlefield, Ivoraj's expression had darkened considerably. The constant attacks, the relentless pressure, these were not opponents she could simply brush aside anymore. For all her overwhelming strength, she was being pushed back. Her patience snapped. The world itself recoiled as she unleashed a devastating burst of energy, sending everyone skidding backward. Even Guy found himself struggling to maintain his footing. But then, everything stopped. The battlefield, the winds, even the very flow of time itself, completely and utterly halted. The only sound that remained was an eerie, almost deafening silence. And in the midst of it all, Velzard stood, her presence radiating an unnatural stillness. Her eyes, cold as the ice, swept over the battlefield. "You truly have no idea who you're up against," she murmured. The realization struck hard. Time itself had ceased to exist. And yet, Guy, Veldora, Rain, Misery, Rimuru, Dino, and Luminous could still move. The others, however, were frozen in place, trapped within the absolute stillness of Velzard's dominion. Even Ivoraj, for all her godlike strength, found herself momentarily caught in the temporal prison. Guy let out a low chuckle. "You've been holding out on us, Velzard." Dino blinked in genuine surprise. "Wait, you can stop time." Velzard didn't respond immediately. Instead, her focus remained locked onto Ivoraj, whose gaze burned with something between fury and admiration. The entity was already starting to break free, cracks forming in the frozen moment of time. "This won't last long," Velzard admitted. "She's already resisting." Ivoraj's lips curled into a smirk despite her immobilized state. "Oh, how fascinating, you actually think this will be enough." Velzard ignored her. Instead, she turned to the others. "Gather as much power as you can," she commanded. "We have only a few moments before she shatters this." Luminous wasted no time. Her body pulsed with divine radiance, celestial energy converging around her as she prepared for the decisive strike. Dino gritted his teeth, lifting his greatsword once more, pouring everything he had into a single, all-consuming swing. Veldora's hands sparked with raw elemental fury, the essence of storms and destruction condensing into his fists. Guy, ever the embodiment of chaos itself, ignited a sphere of hellish annihilation in his palm. And then, time resumed. Ivoraj burst forward instantly, shattering the temporal restraints with an explosive force. But it was too late. Velzard had planned for this. The instant Ivoraj moved, the combined might of Guy, Veldora, Luminous, and Dino was already upon her. A cataclysmic collision of power erupted, engulfing Ivoraj in an apocalyptic storm of destruction. The battlefield was no longer recognizable, torn apart by forces beyond mortal comprehension. And in the midst of it all, Ivoraj finally let out a breath. Not in pain, not in fear, but in genuine exhilaration. "This," she whispered, her violet eyes gleaming. "This is what I've been waiting for." The battlefield had become a war zone of absolute destruction. The sky itself fractured, space distorted under the sheer weight of the energies colliding between titans. Ivoraj stood amidst the storm of attacks, her form no longer as untouched as before. While still uninjured, her movements had shifted, from casual amusement to calculated precision. A testament that, for the first time in this battle, she was being forced to react. Velzard's absolute zero had frozen even the fabric of reality itself, forcing Ivoraj to exert immense power just to move. Guy's hellflame execution burned existence itself, warping the battlefield into an infernal wasteland. Veldora's storm domination turned the sky into a raging tempest, his lightning forming a chaotic barrier of raw destruction. Yet, even as the combined might of the strongest beings in existence bore down upon her, Ivoraj smiled. A deafening explosion erupted as she flexed her fingers. With a single pulse of energy, a shockwave exploded outward, throwing everyone back. Guy dug his heels into the ground, barely holding firm. Veldora flipped midair, stabilizing himself with a burst of wind. Luminous reappeared in a flash of golden light, her hands crackling with divine energy. "You're persistent," Ivoraj said, tilting her head. "But you're still far from stopping me." With a flick of her wrist, spatial collapse ignited around her, folding reality in on itself, creating an implosion of nothingness that devoured everything in its wake. Guy clicked his tongue and responded in kind, launching a counterattack of Annihilation flare, the two forces colliding violently. The world screamed under the impact. The battlefield, already unrecognizable, fractured further. The sheer force sent cracks racing across dimensions, the aftermath visible even in the heavens. Meanwhile, away from the chaos, Rimuru remained focused. Her small hands trembled as she gathered more and more spiritual energy into a condensed core. The energy she wielded wasn't mere magic, it was the essence of the world itself, the lifeblood of nature and existence. Then, suddenly, a voice. Rimuru-san. She didn't stop, but her expression tensed. Who's there? She demanded, not daring to falter in her task. A gentle, nostalgic voice replied. I am a friend of Rimuru-san. Rimuru's eyes widened slightly. Why would I believe you? A small laugh. Because my name is Shizu Izawa, an old friend of his, even if only for one day. Rimuru inhaled sharply. She remembered. Rimuru had spoken of Shizu, the woman who had given him her will before passing on. Rimuru said you were dead, Rimuru whispered. Shizu's voice softened. I am, but I never truly left Rimuru. I've watched over him all this time. There was a pause. Then, with quiet resolve, she continued. I want to talk to him. Rimuru hesitated. He can't see, hear, or feel you, or something. That's right, but if I can enter his mind, I can reach him. Rimuru studied the spiritual energy she had gathered. It wasn't meant for this, but... She exhaled. All right, I'll trust you. With a wave of her tiny hands, she transferred a portion of space spiritual energy to Shizu. The presence around her flickered for a moment, then faded. I hope I did the right thing, Rimuru murmured, then refocused. She turned and shouted toward the battlefield. Hey, I've gathered half of the energy we need. Just buy me more time. Velzard, still standing tall despite the chaos, nodded. Understood. Then, she moved. Time stopped once more. Everything froze in an instant. The battlefield, the winds, even the very flow of mana itself ceased. Only those powerful enough to resist such a phenomenon, Guy, Veldora, Dino, Luminous, Rain, and Misery, could still move. But Ivaraj stood completely still, trapped in the suspended world. For the moment, relief crossed their faces. She can't move in this state, Guy said, exhaling. Dino whistled, running a hand through his hair. Thank the heavens. She was getting on my nerves. Veldora clenched his fists. Now's our chance. Then, the voice of the world spoke. Notice. INDIVIDUAL, Rimuru Temet Dollar and Adaraj, has evolved into a digital life form. Successful. Closing square bracket closing square bracket closing square bracket. The battlefield fell silent. Velzard's eyes widened. Guy's body tensed. Veldora's jaw clenched. Dino's playful expression vanished entirely. What? Guy whispered. Before any of them could react, Ivaraj moved. In the suspended world, she turned her head, her violet eyes gleaming with something beyond excitement. Beyond amusement, she had transcended time itself. With a slow, deliberate step, she shattered the very concept of time stop, reality bending around her as if it were nothing more than a minor inconvenience. Then, she spoke. Did you really think a simple trick like time stop could hold me back? A suffocating presence erupted from her form. She raised her hand, and reality collapsed. Time restarted, not because Velzard allowed it, but because Ivaraj willed it to. A brutal explosion followed. The very sky turned red as ether break tore through existence itself, a blast so massive it consumed the entire battlefield in a storm of entropy. Luminous barely had time to summon a barrier before the attack crashed into her. She gritted her teeth as golden cracks splintered across her defenses. Guy charged forward, summoning Crimson World, an entire dimension of destruction aimed directly at Ivaraj. She merely blinked, and the world Guy created ceased to exist. He staggered back, eyes wide. She erased it. Ivaraj smiled. Cute. Before she could strike, Velzard's absolute zero expanded, freezing everything in its wake. For the first time, Ivaraj stepped back. Not because she was in danger, but because she chose to. Her smirk grew wider. Now this is fun. Then she attacked. She vanished. Not teleportation, but something beyond it. In less than a fraction of a second, she appeared behind Veldora, driving her fist into his gut. The air shattered as Veldora was launched across the battlefield, colliding with a mountain that erased itself on impact. Before Dino could react, she flicked her fingers, and a storm of black matter spears rained down on him, forcing him to defend with eternal abyss. Then, finally, she turned to Velzard. You're the biggest nuisance here, she said with a grin. She reached forward, grasping at the very concept of ice itself. Velzard's eyes widened. No, a sudden tremor shook the battlefield. The air froze, not by Velzard's power, but by Ivaraj's sheer control over existence. The temperature dropped to absolute infinity, something beyond measurable cold. Velzard coughed, her form flickering. Ivaraj leaned in, whispering, "Let's see how long you can last." The battle had turned. The tide was shifting, and for the first time Ivaraj was leading the fight. Meanwhile Hinata Sakaguchi moved swiftly through the shadows of a world at war. The battlefield behind her was a maelstrom of destruction, where beings beyond gods clashed with unrelenting ferocity. The very air trembled under the weight of their power, and even from miles away, she could feel the terrifying presence of Ivaraj dominating the fight. She gritted her teeth, ignoring the overwhelming aura that radiated from the battle. Though she refused to acknowledge it, a deep part of her was shaken. These monsters, these so-called demon lords and dragons, were defying reality itself. That is not my concern. Her mission was clear. Follow Lumina's command, reach her castle, and retrieve what lay hidden within. Engaging in a meaningless battle was out of the question, even if her instincts screamed that Guy and the others were fighting a losing war. Her body moved like a phantom through the war-torn land, bypassing the pockets of destruction and areas warped by the sheer clash of celestial forces. The battlefield itself was a hellscape, littered with the corpses of weaker beings who had dared to witness the battle of gods. Still, she did not stop. She could see Lumina's grand castle in the distance, still intact, untouched by the catastrophe that raged outside. Unlike the battlefield, it stood in eerie silence, a lone island of calm amidst the storm. Hinata ascended the steps of the grand entrance, pushing open the massive doors. The scent of blood lingered faintly, but it was not fresh. The castle had been emptied of its inhabitants, likely evacuated before the battle began. Only two figures remained. Roy Valentine and Gunther, Lumina's most trusted subordinates, stood at the center of the vast hall, their eyes locking onto Hinata the moment she entered. Roy stepped forward first, his crimson eyes narrowed. "Hinata, what the hell is going on out there? Who are they fighting?" "I don't have time to explain," she responded curtly. "Luminous-sama gave me an order. Take me to her secret chamber." Gunther frowned. "How do you know about that?" "That place is only known to Luminous-sama and her most trusted subordinates." Hinata exhaled impatiently. "Because Luminous-sama told me about it. Now, are you going to waste my time with pointless questions, or are you going to do as I say?" Roy hesitated, for a moment before sighing. "Fine, follow me." They led her through the castle's winding corridors, past hidden mechanisms and locked doors. Eventually, they arrived at a heavily secured vault, sealed with layers of divine enchantments. Roy placed his hand on the door, muttering a silent incantation. A deep, resonating hum filled the air as the magic seals unraveled, and the door slowly slid open. Inside the chamber, bathed in dim, eerie light, was a single structure, a crystalline containment pod, pulsing with faint energy. Suspended within was the body of a woman with jet black hair, her expression peaceful as if in eternal slumber. Roy crossed his arms. "Now what?" Hinata stepped forward, eyes locked on the pod. "I have to take this to Tempest." The room fell silent. Then Roy scoffed. "To Tempest? You expect us to deliver something of Luminous-sama's to those monsters?" "It's not a request," Hinata said, her voice ice cold. "It's an order from Luminous-sama herself. And I will follow it, even if I don't like it." Gunther's gaze lingered on the sleeping woman. "Then I'll remain here and guard the castle. Roy, you go with Lady Hinata." Roy clicked his tongue in irritation. "TCH. Fine." Together, Hinata and Roy activated a teleportation spell, vanishing from the chamber. In Tempest. The moment Hinata and Roy arrived outside Tempest's castle, they were met with a sight that neither of them had prepared for. Hundreds of people, men, women, and children, huddled together, sobbing into the bodies of their dead loved ones. The air was thick with grief, with the weight of loss pressing down upon everything. Shuna, Xian, Goblina, Gabwa, and the others worked desperately to comfort the survivors. Xian held a weeping woman in her arms, her own eyes red with suppressed rage. Gabwa and Goblina moved between the wounded, offering what little reassurance they could. Benimaru and the warriors of Tempest stood at the edges of the crowd, their weapons drawn, not against an enemy, but as silent sentinels, ensuring no further harm would come to their people. But their expressions were not just grief-stricken. They were furious, because Rimuru had abandoned them. Suddenly, a glowing teleportation circle appeared, and Hinata and Roy stepped through. Instantly, the atmosphere shifted. Benimaru, Soe, Geld, Ranga, Hakuro, even Gavda, turned their weapons upon them, expressions twisted in rage. Xian's eyes burned with hatred as she stepped forward. Why have you come here again? Haven't you done enough killing for your so-called gods? Roy growled, watch your tongue, woman. Boom. Benimaru's aura exploded outward, suffocating and oppressive. Roy immediately fell silent, his body tensing instinctively at the sheer bloodlust radiating from the general. I should kill you where you stand, Benimaru said coldly. You and your kind have already taken too much from us. Hinata remained unfazed. I am not here to kill anyone. Benimaru narrowed his eyes. Then what? Have you come to mock our suffering? Hinata ignored his words and turned toward Shuna. Luminous Sama ordered me to meet with you. Shuna stepped forward cautiously. I am Shuna. What do you want? Hinata gestured toward the containment pod. Luminous Sama ordered me to bring this body to you. She said to keep it safe. Shuna's eyes widened. Goblina, who stood beside her, nodded firmly. I believe in Luminous Chan. Roy's expression darkened. How dare you address a goddess so casually? Before he could finish, Hakuro's blade flashed. Roy barely registered the movement before pain exploded through his body. His left arm fell to the ground. His vision blurred as agony shot through his entire being. He clutched at the bleeding stump, staggering backward. Mind your words, Hakuro said flatly. Or I will remove more than just your arm. Roy snarled, barely containing his rage. Hinata clicked her tongue in annoyance. TCH. Monsters. Always so damn annoying. Shuna's voice was calm but firm. We will protect this body. But you must leave Tempest. Hinata frowned. And why is that? Gopta stepped forward, his usual playful demeanor gone. Can't you see what you've done? We won't let someone like you stay here. Hinata scoffed. Mind your words, goblin. Gopta met her glare, unfazed. I may be a goblin, but at least I have more humanity than you. Silence. For the first time, genuine anger flickered across Hinata's face. But she said nothing. Instead, she turned sharply and walked away, Roy following behind her, still gripping his bleeding stump. Tempest's people watched them go, their hatred burning like an unquenchable flame. The war was far from over. But the lines had been drawn. And Hinata would never be forgiven. A boundless expanse of darkness stretched infinitely in all directions. There was no ground beneath, no sky above, and no stars to illuminate the vast emptiness. Everything was swallowed by an oppressive silence so absolute that even the concept of sound felt foreign, as if it had never existed in the first place. Time itself seemed to have lost its meaning, leaving behind nothing but a single, frozen moment, an endless present with no past and no future. Drifting through this abyss was a lone figure, a young man whose long, disheveled black hair floated aimlessly in the weightless void. His golden eyes, once radiant and full of life, had dulled into empty, soulless voids, reflecting the darkness that surrounded him. His body, which had once brimmed with overwhelming power, now seemed fragile and motionless, as if all the strength had been drained from his very existence. He had once been known as Rimuru Tempest, a name that had once inspired hope and admiration in those who followed him. But now, that name felt distant and meaningless. It was nothing more than a whisper lost in the void. His lips trembled slightly before a whisper, barely audible, escaped from his throat. I was useless. His voice was hoarse, hollow, and carried none of the strength it once had. I was an idiot. A bitter chuckle followed, devoid of any warmth or humor, as if mocking his own foolishness. I failed to protect her. A sharp, piercing sensation tore through his chest, but there was no wound to be seen. It was not a physical pain, it was something far worse. It was regret, a deep and consuming regret that had dug itself into his very soul. Shizu-san, I couldn't save you. His mind unwillingly conjured up the image of a woman he could still remember the warmth of her presence, the gentle way she had spoken to him, the trust she had placed in him. But she was gone now. Taken from this world, and he had been powerless to stop it. I failed to protect my people. His voice wavered as the memories resurfaced, each one a painful reminder of his failures. The faces of those who had once trusted him flashed through his mind, his subordinates, his friends, the citizens of his nation, all of them had believed in him, and yet, he had failed them when it mattered the most. I failed them all. The words spilled from his lips, each repetition weighing heavier than the last. The guilt clawed at him, digging deep into his core like an unrelenting force. How did I end up here? No answer came. Only silence. Who cares? His golden eyes, now devoid of their former light, stared blankly into the abyss. I'm all alone again. A bitter, empty laugh escaped from him, but even that laugh felt weak and meaningless. But this is nice, isn't it? Here, in this vast emptiness, there was nothing left to protect. There were no expectations, no responsibilities, no battles to fight, and no one left to lose. No more pain, no more suffering, just nothingness. His fingers twitched slightly before curling into weak fists. I have nothing left. As the weight of his despair bore down on him, pressing him deeper into the abyss, he felt himself slipping further into the void. There was nothing left for him in the world above, no reason to return. Maybe, just maybe, it would be easier to let go. But then, a voice. Soft, gentle, familiar. Rimuru-san. His breath caught in his throat, his body tensing as his eyes widened slightly. That voice. No, it wasn't possible. He was hallucinating. She was dead. She was never coming back. Never, ever. Yet, the voice called out again. Rimuru-san, I am here. You can hear me, right? His hands clenched instinctively, his teeth pressed together tightly. I don't have time for illusions. Leave me alone. For a moment, there was silence. Then, the voice spoke again, this time, closer. I am not an illusion, Rimuru-san. I am real. His heart, which had long been swallowed by emptiness, trembled at those words. Something deep within him stirred. Slowly, hesitantly, his gaze turned in the direction of the voice. And then, even deeper in Rimuru's mind, deep within the vast emptiness of Rimuru's subconscious, where his mind had begun to collapse under the weight of his despair, something still struggled against the darkness. A small, flickering light pulsed within the void, a fragile but unwavering force that refused to be extinguished. Seal, she had been calling to him, reaching out desperately, but no matter how many times she called his name, there was no response. It was as if he could no longer hear her. As if he had already given up. I refused to accept that. Seal had always been logical, methodical, and efficient. She did not possess emotions in the way that humans did, but she understood one thing with absolute certainty. Rimuru was suffering, and she could not allow that. She attempted to re-establish the connection between their consciousnesses. Less than connection attempt, failed. Greater than, less than retrying. Greater than, less than failed. Greater than, again, and again. No matter how many times she tried, her voice could not reach him. The walls he had built around his heart were impenetrable, drowning him in his own despair. But then, a new presence emerged. A soul, a human soul, one that should have long since faded from existence. Shizu Izawa. A link formed, an opportunity. Seal immediately grasped onto it. This was it. This was the key to bringing him back. Rimuru's breath hitched as he slowly turned toward the source of the voice, his dulled golden eyes widening in disbelief as his vision cleared. Standing before him were two figures. One of them was a woman with long, silvery blue hair, her crimson eyes holding a warmth that was both unfamiliar yet comforting. Her presence radiated a sense of unwavering devotion and understanding. Seal, but beside her, a woman with shoulder-length dark hair, a gentle expression on her face, and black eyes filled with kindness. A woman who should have been long gone. Shizu Izawa. His entire body trembled as he took a step forward, his lips parting as a choked breath escaped him. Shizu-san. He didn't understand. This wasn't possible. She was supposed to be gone. She was dead. So why was she standing in front of him, looking at him with those same kind, gentle eyes? Before he could even process his emotions, a single tear escaped from his eye, trailing down his cheek. Then another, and another, until, without realizing it, his vision blurred completely as his tears fell freely. His legs gave out beneath him, and he collapsed onto his knees, unable to hold himself up any longer. For the first time in what felt like an eternity, the darkness around him cracked. The endless abyss wavered, and in that moment, for the first time since he had fallen into despair, a golden light began to shine. Poem time. In the abyss where silence reigns, where time stands still in sorrow's chains, a soul once bright now fades to dust, lost in grief, betrayed in trust. Golden eyes, once fierce with fire, now dull with loss, with no desire. A heart that fought, a will that swayed, crushed beneath the night's cruel shade. Rimuru-san. A whisper soft, a voice so sweet, a melody of warmth and peace. Yet in the void, he turns away, believing love has lost its way. Illusions, leave me be. But fate is kind to those who break, for bonds once forged do not forsake. A spirit's touch, a voice anew. A love that lingers, strong and true. Shizu stands, her eyes like dawn. A guiding light, though she is gone. Yet here she stands, defying fate. To pull him from this endless state. Beside her waits a silver flame. With loving eyes that know his name. Seal, the one who walks his mind. A soul that never left behind. You are not alone, their voices say. Not then, not now, not any day. Rise, my love, cast fear aside. For in the light, you must abide. Tears unbidden, streaked with pain. A trembling heart that beats again. A prince once lost, a king undone. Begins to see the rising sun. But shadows lurk in twisted guise. A foe who hides behind his lies. His reign will end, his chains will break. For love is stronger than the fate he makes. So rise, O king, reclaim your name. Burn bright, burn fierce, rekindle flame. For where love walks, the dark must fall. And soon, the void will fade to all. To be continued.